Welcome to Data War.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Data Wars podcast. I'm with my partner Ash Srivastava. So we are excited today because we have a special guest, a friend, a mentor, and my former boss actually, Dan. Those days, right? And a data management
Friend
expert
first.
more than everything. Dan, sorry, you were saying something.
I said friend first.
I love it. Friend, mentor, boss, everything. And Dan, I've seen you over last, I don't know, 7, 8 years now or something like that, and we've known each other for a long time. I really like your approach to data management, the expertise you have gained, and most importantly, someone who has very well blend the music and data topics together from last few years. What I've seen you do, and most importantly, a wonderful human being. We have shared a lot of things together over the years, and I'm so happy to have you on here. I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit here and tell everybody in the audience who you are and what you do.
Well, first, thanks, Prash. Like I said, friends first. It's great to be here with you and Ash. I'm excited. Just to give people a little bit of background about me, I've been in the data and analytics space for over 25 years. And about the same time I started that career journey, my first child was diagnosed with autism. And that actually started me on a path to understand how the brain processes information and makes decisions. And so over the years, I realized that what I was learning to help my son could also help organizations improve engagement, communication, and decision making. So now I'm trying to bring my data and analytics experience, my neuroscience and cognitive psychology experience, and my sales and marketing experience together to really help data and analytics leaders understand like how to sell, your projects to business stakeholders.
That's an amazing experience and an angle as well, Dan. I think some of the things we learn from our lives, which is I don't think anything can replace that. And your ability to translate the learnings you had from life into something we all can learn. Data management experts, marketers, you name it. I think that's a very interesting contrast, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today, right? Talk about your decades of experience working in data management solutions for customers, as well as both of as a practitioner as well as a marketer, and how that technology investment and the ROI gap continues to exist today, even after 20 years of we doing this together. I think that sets up for a great time. And Ash, I know you had a bunch of questions for Dan. Before we go there, I think we were talking before we started this podcast. Ash mentioned this. You look like Tim Cook. Is that something you always get from people?
Well, it's funny, Prash. So I have gotten it at events like the MDM and Data Governance Summit. We did it in Informatica.
Yeah.
People came up to me one time. But the weirdest one was I was at a gas station. I'm getting gas, and there was a person. He looked like maybe he was a gardener, not like a high-tech person. And he goes, "Tim Cook?" And I'm driving a really beat-up car. I'm like, "Would Tim Cook drive that?" No, I'm not Tim Cook.
Did you give him a pose or allowed him
No,
to take a
no. But
selfie?
if he would have asked me for a selfie, I would have done it.
You have been a supporter of this podcast from the very beginning. So when we just started launching our first, second episode, I would see lights, right? And then I would like, I didn't read the name because, LinkedIn shows a small image. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what? Tim Cook liked our podcast? How could we be that popular?
Nice.
So it's really nice to connect with you, Dan. And, with your background in marketing, the first question, which makes me really curious, because you've done a lot of selling, a lot of positioning, how to position these data management products for the market. Every boardroom today is doubling down on AI, data modernization, analytics, right? And most companies are still struggling to show measurable ROI. And really, I want to understand, from your perspective, why do you think this paradox exists and continues to exist, even after all of this technology investment? Why are we failing to create visible business value? And an addendum to that question, when I'm thinking about it, is like, if you were to go to the boardroom today, what metrics would you want leaders to care about?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. We're just going to dive right in. I love it. I love it. So look, Ash, this is just my perspective, but right now I think there's a little bit of like magical thinking about AI, right? We're just going to sprinkle some magic AI agent fairy dust on top of what we currently do, and then it's going to drive up corporate valuations, right? But look, we've been through this type of thing before. We know from the big data era, right? That doesn't work. The promise of putting everything into Hadoop and it will magically transform your business didn't pan out, right? There's all kinds of other issues that we really needed to address before we could start getting value out of it.
Yeah.
So, like personally, if I walked into a boardroom today, what I would tell the members, look, if you want your investment in AI to increase enterprise valuation, you need to be thinking about how you re-architect your end-to-end business processes, right? You need to be investing in outcomes, not technology. So, if you don't, you're going to fall into what I call the value translation gap, right? That's where initiatives run into problems, right? Starting with technology instead of business value.
That's a
Makes sense, Dan. So are we measuring the wrong things? Like most leaders are looking at petabytes. You hear this news every day now. We got to build capacity. We have 300 models, and we're building more. Are the leaders looking at the wrong metrics? What should they be actually looking at?
Yeah. So, I mean, first off, yes, we're looking at the wrong metric, right? Like, and Prash knows this. For me, right, at the highest level, if you're managing a company, you're managing revenue, cost, and risk, right? Like everything else sort of rolls up into those three big buckets, right? Yeah. And so you should always be looking at it from that lens. But I actually think it's less about measuring the wrong things, and it's more about the wrong frame of reference. Mm-hmm. So I have a newsletter, the Techno-Optimist, on LinkedIn. And my most popular post was why you don't need a data and AI strategy, right? So in there, I talk about something known as anchoring bias. So where the brain tends to limit evaluation and decision-making based on the frame of reference or anchor. So in this case, data and analytics becomes the central focus, and we downplay or ignore value generation, right? Mm. So the brain, basically, it filters information and interpretation to confirm like the frame of reference that I have. And that skews evaluation and decision-making and results in misguided priorities and resource allocation.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing which I've seen, if you start looking at the patterns that emerge as to why organizations are failing, Dan, and Ash, you probably see this in your consulting world as well a lot. We have seen this paradox repeat year after year, in my view, right? Like, for example, just to give you a very solid example of this, we consistently have heard every speakers at every data management time conference that exists on the planet Earth talk about ROI and the importance of engaging business to drive the outcomes. Everybody talks about it. If you look into so what are the learnings question at the end of the session, like everybody talks about, make sure you engage with your business, make sure you have an ROI defined, like things of that nature, right? That paradox exists, that thing exists. However, nobody seemed to understand that technology first mindset is where it all breaks down, right? You got to think about outcome first. We say that in these conferences, we say those are the learnings, and we go back being those technical people doing technical things and like embracing new thing because that's shiny new thing now, right? Versus focusing on what can I help my organization achieve through technology, right? It's almost always the other way around, right? So maybe Dan, the question I think is like going back to your anchoring bias, I think you talked about, but maybe there are other biases that exist here. So what are the sort of these patterns that you're seeing that we often see in these different transformation cycles we have seen over the years?
Yeah. So, again, I think we have a cult of technology sort of mind frame, right? Because we keep bringing our technology mental model, right, to the challenges. And cognitive bias, so just a quick cognitive bias, you could just think of as mental shortcuts that we take, right, to make decisions. And it, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing. Everybody has it. It's just the way the brain works, right? It's a function of how we've developed as human beings. I mean, the race, not us individually, right? But those mental shortcuts can get us into trouble, right? They can distort or limit the lens through which we view things, right? How we perceive problems, how we generate solutions, how we evaluate decisions, and especially in transformative contexts, you know, like AI adoption, right? So, I mean, if we have to make a decision quickly, right? Orange stripes, tiger, flee, right? Because you don't want to wait around to get eaten to find out, you know, is it or isn't it a tiger, right? In that context, right, the speed matters. But in some of these decisions, like, we really need to open up, at least in the beginning, right? You know, we talk about brainstorming and stuff, but really open up that lens through which we're viewing things. So some examples of cognitive bias and how it gets in the way. One is status quo bias. So essentially, you're trying to preserve your current mental model, right? And that blocks the cognitive flexibility to even consider alternative frames of reference. So it shuts down the possibility of reframing, right, altogether. So,
and I'll tell you one example of that, Dan, really quickly. Not to stop your flow, but I'll tell you exactly how the cognitive sort of bias, or sorry, the status quo bias shows up in my day-to-day life. I have been wanting to change my internet service provider, like most of us, I think, because these companies we work with often don't provide the services we need, right? I want to switch over to a new provider, but I consistently push that forward, that decision to do that, because I just don't feel like I have enough time to go and do that phone call, which is simplest thing I can do today.
Right.
But I get stuck in this mode of like, oh gosh, now I need to do a phone call. Now I need to talk to somebody and make sure they understand my need. And then the second part of that fear is the common one, which is like, will I make a right decision going with a different vendor? What if their service is bad? What if they're not good at what I thought they were good at? And will it end up being a big disaster? So that status quo even shows up in our real life every day, right? Do you agree?
Absolutely. It's one of the most powerful barriers to transformation. And so,
comfort zone, right? I mean, we all love it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. I mean, so some ways to address that. One is, like, for yourself, ask yourself, okay, what would I do if I was just starting from scratch today, right? And so you sort of reframe the possibilities, right? Opening up that lens. Like, I don't have all this. If I don't have all this history, like, would I do? How might I do things differently? The other thing, when you're trying to convince somebody else, so I don't know if you've heard of Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow.
Right.
So he and his partner Tversky, they won the Nobel Prize in economics for something called prospect theory. So prospect theory basically says the emotional pain of loss is 2 to 3 times more intense than the emotional pleasure from gain, right?
Interesting.
So if you think about somebody's at the starting point, like, just think of it as a, X and Y axis, and somebody's in the middle, and that's their status quo. And you want to convince them to move. Like, what do we normally do? We normally go immediately to the benefits. Hey, look at these benefits you're going to get. And that's great, but those benefits are unknown. I don't know if I'm going to get those, right? So what you need to do first is start with, look, the way you're doing things now is costing you $1 million. And that's directly to the bottom line, right? So you got to trigger that, like, why do I need to change? And then not only are you going to save that $1 million, but I'm going to give you these additional benefits on top of it. So then you go from a 1x, motivation factor to a 3 to 4x motivation factor.
Yeah.
Highlight the pain essentially, Dan. Um, Walk with them in their shoes and help them understand, that this is how it feels, but and bridge that gap from the pain to the pleasure.
Right.
So
I'm learning.
you're
I'm taking
telling
notes.
me
You want both, but we typically just go right to the benefits, right?
Yeah,
We don't give them the why I need to change.
you convinced me to come out of the status quo of making that phone call, Dan, because that 5-minute phone call is a pain for me to go through right now. But if I do
I'm
that phone call, I
texting you
probably get
tomorrow.
yeah.
I'm texting you tomorrow. Make sure you do that.
Who knows? I might get double the speed I have than right now,
Yeah.
internet speed, right? And probably
We will
get
hold you accountable now, Prash.
which is worth the spending 5 minutes of my time. So
Yeah. And then I mean that's just one example, right? There are other things like confirmation bias, which is basically cherry picking the data, right? So I have this saying, we talk about data driven decision making. Well, I have decision driven data making. So basically, we already know the decision that we want, and then we go and cherry pick the data that confirms our point of view or the decision.
we see that a lot in the political spectrum, don't we?
You don't want to get there.
I don't want to go there, but
we're not going to go political, but it
Yes.
happens everywhere,
it happens everywhere.
right? So
yes.
I mean, so you want to actively seek out, right, other points of view, right? Ask other people. You have to have the courage, right, to say, hey, my particular way of doing things might not be the best way, right? So that requires a little bit of courage on your part. But really, when we're talking about big transformation changes, right, it's really important when the scope and the impact is so big that we don't let cognitive bias get in the way. So Space Shuttle Challenger, the engineers told management, hey, we think that there's a problem with the O-rings in cold weather. And management said, hey, based on other cold weather launches, we think everything is fine. And, we know what happened in that case, right? So when those impacts are really big, we really need to look at our own cognitive bias. And again, I'm not saying it's inherently bad. It's not, but in those types of circumstances, it's important.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. I know we wanted to talk about translating technology into value. Ash, I know you had a question there.
I was just thinking about what Dan said. I'm a big psychology buff, and all these biases you mentioned about anchoring and status quo and confirmation. It plays a role not only just in organizational decision making, but when we look at our own careers and why you stay at a certain employer for long, why you didn't jump the ship earlier. Status quo bias and environment plays a big role. How we look at our relationships and our self-worth. They're such closely tied to all these biases we have as humans that it explains that if individually we have such a hard time making a move, then these are organizations made of thousands of people. Shifting their direction is going to be much more harder than if we struggle with it individually. So great insights, Dan. I really I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
I wanted to just change the direction a bit. I want to get more practical from all this philosophical talk.
Yeah.
To what I just said, how do you think organizations close this gap, especially since we struggle individually with these concepts? How can they start turning this technology investments into real business outcomes?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. So, again, I think it really starts, bridging that value translation gap really starts by changing our frame of reference. One from technology implementation to a business outcome, but also, if you think about it today, most organizations are still operating from a frame of reference of collect, clean, store, serve data, right? And that mindset built a foundation for descriptive and diagnostic analytics. And that was great. But now we're talking about deploying autonomous or semi-autonomous AI agents, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be thinking in terms of event-driven architectures and orchestration, right? So agents they detect events, interpret the context, trigger some sort of coordinated response, then learn from outcomes, right, which require feedback loops, not static pipelines. And then, you really need that orchestration to provide the connective tissue, coordinating the actions between agents, enforcing policies, ensuring global coherence, right? So if it's a different mindset. Yeah. And then, so instead of asking, how do we make our data AI ready, right? We ask, what outcomes do we want to improve? What are the analytics required? And what are the best tools for those analytics, right? Right now, everything is a Gen AI nail, right? Like you can you can use traditional machine learning for lots of things, and it's way more efficient than using generative AI, right? Everybody thinks that the current definition of an agent, right, is an LLM agent, but you could have a machine learning agent. You could have a causal AI agent, right? You can have an IoT device as an agent, right? I mean, everybody's context is very limited. So I think
essentially,
widen that. Yeah.
We so sprinkling AI across workflows, Dan,
right.
Redesign these processes. So we're not thinking, like you mentioned, from yesterday's mindset. We're so bogged down by the past that we're not able to kind of think forward or think futuristic.
Sure.
What role do you think technical storytelling has in this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's about bridging the gap between the technical teams and executives by mapping every initiative directly to some sort of business outcome, right? Revenue lift, cost avoidance, risk reduction, right? It's aligning your narrative with their goals and outcomes that earns trust, right? When that's for me, that's really where it's at.
I agree with you. I think storytelling is such a powerful thing. And again, in the context of like telling the value of what you're investing to the business leaders, which oftentimes we end up doing as technologists, as practitioners. I think that's the most critical aspect of our jobs. It has to be, because I've seen people who do a really, really good job at that tend to get their way around and create case for more investment, case for the right transformation strategy, and get that agreement from the businesses, right? So that in my view is the most important skill, often underrated skill, but the folks who do a good job with that.
Right. I mean, some people are naturally better at it than others, but it's a skill, right? I have a very simple framework that I use, right? I mean, to just sort of get practical, right? So why change, right? What's the stakeholders' business need, right? And why change? So let's just say I want to get funding to improve ship to address data. And I'm going to the CFO, right? And I say, well, I'm sorry, first let me step back. Okay. I have a very simple framework. Why change? What are the stakeholders' business needs? The current problems, what's preventing the stakeholder from addressing their needs? The consequences, right? The impact of doing nothing, because 40% of B2B deals end in no decision, right?
Yeah.
Didn't choose you, didn't choose your competitor, just status quo, right? The new approach, right? Your solution to the current problems and the expected benefit. So meaningful value tied to their particular business goals. So that's the framework that I have, that I use.
I love that framework. I know elements of those frameworks showed up when we were working together, Dan. I can recall now what you're talking about to a certain degree and relate to that. So, Ash, did you have something before I go?
No. I was just pondering over the framework Dan mentioned. It was very insightful, and he said it so quickly that I had to think about it.
That's good. So, Dan, let's talk a little bit about what good looks like. Success for organizations can be a variety of things. Like it varies from, hey, we optimized our engine in terms of productivity. We efficiently now launching products faster. Now we are delivering great customer experiences. Our campaigns are more efficient now. Blah blah blah. Right? There's so many different ways to measure organizational impact. I'm curious from your standpoint. What do you think? Like sort of the best way to measure what's good, what's working, what's right for in terms of technology investment and the outcome related to that.
Yeah. So, again, it goes back to my framework, right? Start with the business outcome or the business goal and work backwards, right? So if the CFO's goal is to reduce days sales outstanding, right? Okay, you have your metric, right? Every business person, right? Like they've got goals and they've got metrics tied to those goals. And even better if they have incentives like bonuses that are tied to those metrics, right? Because we let's face it, like,
oh yeah,
look at your goals. What I'm going to get paid on bonus at the end of the year, and that's where I work to, right? So
yes.
If I'm the CFO and my goal is to reduce day sales outstanding, right? That's the metric. Where are we now? How much can we reduce it? And then we work backwards in that framework. Okay, what are the analytics needed, right? What's the data that's required to feed those analytics, right? Yeah. And that's how I approach that, right? So it could be, increase cross-sell by 10%. It could be reduce day sales outstanding by 5 days. It could be, reduce inventory carrying cost, right? But the thing is, like just go talk to your business stakeholders, right? And understand what their goals are. Like that's where you, like in the next week, it doesn't even have to be in the next month, right? Just go talk to them, right? And find out like what it is that they're focused on, and that's going to help you then map your technology back to what they're working on. But when you're selling, you start with, here's the problem. We're losing $1 million a year on reshipping fees, right? Here's the solution. We're going to clean up ship to address data, and here's the benefits. That $1 million is going to go immediately to the bottom line. Custom day sales outstanding are going to happen 3 days faster. Customers are going to be happy. Repeat orders and probably larger order size.
Yeah. So it's basically organizational clarity. People understanding how their work connects to measurable impact.
Right.
Definitely, I think that clarity builds confidence and creates momentum.
And that clarity, it not only it builds commitment to the change. So you think about it, right? If somebody comes and says, "Okay, Prash, you need to go do this," right? But you don't really want to, you'll go do it to do the checkbox, right?
Yeah,
but if I've convinced
right,
I convince you that there's value for you, you're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I want to go do this." So neuroscience has found people that are committed are 20% more productive than people that are just compliant.
Yeah. Prash, we're going to make sure by the end of this call that you go and call your interest service provider and change it, okay? We're going to hold you accountable.
It feels like that. It feels like you both have made a mission for me to make that phone call. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
If I can come up with other status quo bias I have right now.
So Dan, your philosophy as a techno-optimist is inspiring. The idea that technology can make the world a better, fairer place. But what does technology for good mean to you in practice? And how do you balance optimism on technology's potential, like, with AI, we're hearing so much, with the realism about the risks like biases and job losses and the misuses?
Yeah. So technology for good to me means improving people's life, making society more equitable for everybody, not just automating work, but amplifying human potential. So like I've seen a few things like this person invented a technology to do water desalinization, right? That runs off solar, right? Like that's a great one. Or another one where they were using AI to help people that, couldn't speak anymore, right? To communicate with other people. Like those are great, uses, right? Or, think about the campfire, right, in California, right? Like if we had technology to help people understand, like, where is the fire and how's it moving, we could transmit, like, okay, go down these roads, right, instead of that road because you're going to get stuck, right? Those are the types of things when technology for good, that's where it is for me. Now, in terms of the balancing optimism with realism, I always tell people that being optimistic is not being Pollyannish. Right? Like, no, everything is going to be good. No, like, okay, let's just not go there, right? It's about being realistic, right? There are ways that we can use technology to improve society, to improve human life, right? We have to make the choice to do that, and we also need to understand what are the barriers, what's the pushback on that, what are the risks of doing that, right? I think a lot of times we don't think about second order consequences, right? We sort of like, oh, we're going to make this decision and it's going to do this, and we don't think about it in a larger systems thinking way, right? And I think a lot of the downside of technology that we've seen, I'm gonna come back to the AI and work thing in a minute, but is really a lack of second order thinking about what are the downstream impacts, because applications run in a very deterministic way, right? And our technology mindset, right, gets like a very determined, but life is very probabilistic, right? And Gen AI is showing us that now, right? Of how much life is really probabilistic, right? So thinking about those second order consequences. The current job losses, I think that, this is my own personal opinion, two things. One, there is going to be significant changes in the workforce and the type of roles and where people add value. What I'm concerned about with all the layoffs, and anybody who's used generative AI knows it's great for getting so far, but you need a certain amount of domain expertise to validate what comes out of it. So my concern right now is we're saying, let's get rid of the entry-level jobs. We'll give these tools to the people who are experienced, and they're going to be way more productive and they're going to get stuff done. But you're not training the people behind to get the domain experience, right, that's required to be able to use those tools, right, when those other people go off and retire.
I completely agree and acknowledge that Dan approach is, the domain experts, the experience, that's irreplaceable, right? And we have seen hallucination being the biggest problem with AI, and if you put that in the wrong hands of immaturity, you will only get immature answers. Combine that with the hallucination part of AI, it just can be set up for a disaster. So I've seen that in action already. I've seen, I don't know if you guys saw the news about, I don't want to call the name of the consulting firm that worked with Australian government, but there was like all sort of things when, AI was left on autopilot, right? So things don't always, work out well. So it's an interesting paradox for sure.
Fluency is not understanding. Right? Gen AI is fluent. It can put together words and they sound beautiful. Great structure, concise. But if you have the domain experience and you read the paragraph, you go, WTF.
Exactly. I love it. Look, Ash, I don't know if you have any other questions. I wanted to summarize here, if I could.
Questions, Prash. Go ahead.
I learned a lot today, and I want to take a quick minute here to summarize what I learned from you, Dan. Three things, really. One, stop measuring activity, start measuring the value. Sort of shift your focus from reporting on technical metrics like petabytes, model counts, etc., to measuring actual business outcomes that you can deliver, which is about revenue lifting, cost avoidance, risk reduction, etc. And that surfaces in many contexts in different ways, depending on who you're talking to in the business. That's one. Second, challenge your legacy mental models, right? To a certain degree, we're talking about cognitive bias, things of that nature. Being aware of that your organization is likely to be held back by cognitive biases and outdated thinking is a real threat to your progress, right? So keeping that mental models in mind and reacting to that accordingly, I think, is critical. And third one I noted here is treat AI as your decision system, right? Not the be all end all. It is just a mechanism to get to the outcomes faster in more productive way. You got to frame all your new AI initiatives as projects designed to improve specific business decisions that you're making, not just to just to consume data, for example. So if you follow this with technical storytelling, which is very powerful, that will translate that complexity we have into more meaningful financial impact for the organization. I think that's, for me, just as I was summarizing it, I felt like, wow, that is some really good takeaway for, I don't know, 30 minutes or so that we spent here, right? Maybe you spent more time. I the time went by so fast.
It did. So thank you, Prash, for the great summary. I think you really kind of did a great job in putting the top 3 takeaways from this podcast. Dan, where can people find you if they want to kind of get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably where I'm most active. You can reach out to me there. I also have a newsletter, the Techno-Optimist, on LinkedIn, where you can find lots of articles that I've already written on how the brain processes information and makes decisions and the impact of that on data and analytics initiatives.
Sounds good. And thank you so much for your time, Dan. And it was a pleasure talking to you. I know Prash and myself, we both really enjoyed connecting with you, and all the insights which we've gathered. I'm sure our audience is going to love it as well. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on another episode of Data Wars. And we're looking forward to you guys liking and sharing this and subscribing to us for our future content. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.